And away we go. Well, good day. It's Maynard from Gears of Trust, your local podcast here in Fort McMurray. Today's date is the 4th of April, 2025. That's right, it's Friday. I'm recording this and then going to edit it right quick and get it up and posted. So I had hoped to get this done yesterday. I was busy with someone else yesterday in California working on another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm going to be solo on the show, and I'm going to be taking everybody to the movies. A funny question came across a discussion with the wife and I on the onset of our election here in Canada. Man, that's a pressing issue. It takes place at the end of this month. But my question to my wife was, why do we need a governor general to drop a writ and call an election? And in the province, why do we need a lieutenant governor to call an election, right? So we hire politicians to run our province, to run our country. Why do we need the crown or the governor general or the lieutenant governor? And this is what begat the initial question. Once I started looking into that, that took me into a totally different rabbit hole altogether, folks. Well, no, it didn't. It gave me the answer. I have the answer why we need a governor general and why we need a lieutenant governor, or why we use those. Not that we need them, but we use them. So now that we're down the rabbit hole, I'm usually talking about bosses and boots or break room or whatever we're talking about. But I watched a documentary on YouTube. And it's called Canada the Illusion. And I thought it was going to be a real fucking tinfoil hat episode. You know what? It's going to be the driest documentary I've ever seen. And I'm going to share that with you today. And I'm going to stop it partway through the session and give you my little spin on things and just put things in layman's term, which I like to do so much. That being said, let's jump off to the movies here right now, and we're going to get the show going. The whole idea of this is to get you to ask questions. I'm not going to give you answers. The whole purpose of this is to make you question what's going on, right? So here we go. I'm going to pop this over right now. Yeah, let's get it rocking here, buddy. I'm going to take you to the show. Nice. It's got a buffer on it.
Canada. A land of endless opportunities, extraordinary beauty, and prosperity. A place that is known for kindness, benevolence, and generosity. A place that is built on courage, integrity, and truth. Or so it appears. Yet, something doesn't feel right. Can you feel it? The underlying sense of unease and discomfort. That feeling when you know you're being deceived, and you're wondering, how big of a lie could it be? For how long have we been lied to? How much of all this is possibly a show? A well-played theatrical performance? Or maybe it's all an illusion. Is it time to see what is behind the curtain? Is it time to resist the control system? To unplug from the matrix and switch it off? In 1759, at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, Great Britain defeated France and renamed the colony to the province of Quebec. In 1776, the 13 British colonies to the south declared independence from Great Britain and formed the United States of America. In 1791, the Constitutional Act divided the province of Quebec into the provinces of Lower Canada and Upper Canada. In 1840, the Act of Union merged the colonies of Upper Canada and Lower Canada into the province of Canada. In 1864, at the Quebec Conference, delegates from each colony discussed the desire to form a federal union, while each province would retain its independence and autonomy under the umbrella of a constitutional monarchy. From 1861 to 1865, during the American Civil War between the Union, the North, and the Confederacy, the South, Great Britain built warships for the Confederacy, armed with British weapons. Many merchant ships of the Union were destroyed by the Confederate Army in Great Britain. When Lincoln won the war, he sought claims from Great Britain, but Great Britain refused. The Union even threatened to declare war and annex British North America in 1866. In 1866, John A. Macdonald, chairman of the delegates from the colonies, participated in finalizing the Kingdom of Canada Bill at the London Conference to draft the BNA Act. Great Britain had a dilemma: risk a possible war with the United States of America, pay reparations for the sinking of the Union's ships, grant the colonies in Canada self-governance. Queen Victoria needed a clever solution. Lord Thring's brilliant scheme: keep the Canadian colonies and make them pay the reparations to the United States of America through taxation, while deceiving the colonies into thinking that they govern themselves. On March 29, 1867, the British North America Act received royal assent, meaning it was formally approved by the court in Chancery. It went into effect on July 1, 1867, and created a united colony known as the Dominion of Canada. Until 1982, July 1st was celebrated as Dominion Day. Since 1982, July 1st has been celebrated as Canada Day, when the BNA Act was renamed the Constitution Act. Let us take a closer look at the original BNA Act 1867. This is the intended preamble. And it states: by reason of the request of the colonies for federal government, it is expedient, therefore, that they have laws and regulations to guide them. This is the modified preamble. And it states: whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion under the Crown.
That's a very, very, very important note to get into your head right now. That's your footnote, your basis here. One dominion under the Crown. Very, very key.
1889 Interpretation Act defined a British possession to be any part of a dominion, and it defined the term colony to be any part of a dominion.
These are legal definitions, people, that we carry right through to this very day. 4th of April 2025, these definitions are still in effect.
The Dominion of Canada was clearly a colony of Great Britain and not an independent country. The colony did not confederate in 1867. The BNA Act was not brought back to Canada for the United Colony to sign and ratify. The original BNA Act is located in the United Kingdom and has always been the property of the United Kingdom and not Canada. Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867, declares that the provisions of this act extend to the heirs and successors of the kings and queens of Great Britain. Section 109 of the BNA Act, 1867, states that all lands, minerals, and royalties belonging to the several provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick at the Union shall belong to the several provinces of Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. All natural resources belong to the various colonies, with exceptions as per Section 109. More land was to be added to the Dominion of Canada through use. If the Dominion could use the land, then they could claim the land. In 1868, through the Rupert's Land Act, use of land was purchased from the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1870, through the Manitoba Act. And in 1871, through the British Columbia Terms of Union. In 1871, the Treaty of Washington was concluded. It settled the claims between the United Kingdom and the United States of America, even though the United Kingdom never admitted any wrongdoing. However, it is interesting to see whose names also show up. Sir John Alexander MacDonald, Knight Commander of the Most Honourable Order of the Bath, a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council for Canada, and Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Her Majesty's Dominion of Canada, and Montague Bernard.
Very important here to understand that Sir John A. Macdonald was a member of the Privy Council for Canada, right? And Most Honourable Order of the Bath. This is all going to tie together here, folks. You know who the players are.
The Privy Council is a formal body of advisors to the monarch of the United Kingdom, in this case, Queen Victoria, meaning John A. Macdonald represented Great Britain. In 1867, Macdonald was appointed, and not voted in, as Prime Minister by the Governor-General at the time, Lord Monck.
So, much the same as Mr. Carney, he was not voted in, he was appointed, anointed, whatever you want to call it. 1867, John A. Macdonald was appointed, as Prime Minister at that juncture in time by the Governor General at the time, who was Lord Monck, right? So,
In 1854, Macdonald, a Freemason since 1844, became a member of the Order of the Masonic Knights Templar. Macdonald got engaged to the much younger Susan Agnes Bernard, cousin of Montague Bernard, who worked with British royalty in London in December of 1866. They married in February of 1867, 1 month before the BNA Act was signed. John A. MacDonald was the one who helped Queen Victoria achieve her grand scheme of deceiving the colonists into thinking they were now self-governed and had confederated. He received generous titles, appointments in the British monarchy, and a much younger second wife in addition to his annual salary of $5,000 equivalent to $125,000 today, in return for a betrayal of the colonists. In the Treaty of Washington, 1871, John A. MacDonald agreed to give the San Juan Islands and Point Roberts to the United States of America, in addition to granting equal rights to the fisheries for 10 years, because he was representing Great Britain and not the Dominion of Canada. How can he be called the father of Confederation and a hero by some when a confederation was never achieved, and when he in fact betrayed the colonists?
Now, that's a brief overview of your British North American Act. So, from where we take our date of Confederation in 1967, July 1st, that was not Confederation as a country, but more so a forming of the Dominion of Canada. Letters Patent Revocation Act that you're seeing coming up is very important here as well, folks, as this all ties together.
By means of the Letters Patent Revocation Act, 1878, the British monarchy instituted the office of Governor-General of the Dominion on a permanent basis. The most important part is found in Section 9 of the Act. The British monarchy declared full power and authority through letters patent, including their heirs and successors. Letters patent are an official declaration used to grant patent rights by the Crown and Chancery to officially grant titles and office to people or make other declarations.
The Letters Patent Act. Let's touch base on that right quickly here, folks. So the Letters Patent Act. This is where my initial question started, and I didn't even realize it. That's when the British monarchy instituted the office of the Governor General, and henceforth provincially the Lieutenant Governors, right? So that's where the Crown has its authority implemented through that, okay? And it was controlled by the Crown and Chancery, and the Crown and Chancery is officially what it does is it grants titles and offices to people and make other declarations. So who gives the Governor General the power? Who gives the Lieutenant Governor the power? The Crown and Chancery. Crown Lands is starting to add together here, folks. So let's go back to the show. What a rabbit hole.
With this Letters Patent Revocation Act, Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867, was now redundant. Recall, the provisions of this act extend to the heirs and successors of the kings and queens of Great Britain. On June 19, 1893, the Statute Law Revision Act was passed. With it, Queen Victoria explicitly repealed Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867. This Statute Law Revision Act, 1893, was never repealed after it was passed, and Section 2 of the BNA Act, 1867, was never reenacted. Queen Victoria died on January 22, 1901, from a brain hemorrhage while residing at Osborne House. Interestingly, during the same time as Guglielmo Marconi fired up a very powerful radio wave antenna just 12 miles away. With her death, the BNA Act died as well, due to the repeal of Section 2. Did this remove the British monarchy? No, because of the Letters Patent Revocation Act 1878. Did this end the Dominion of Canada? No, because of the Letters Patent Revocation Act 1878 and the Interpretation Act 1889. Recall the definition of the term colony. The Dominion of Canada and the British monarchy carried on under Edward VII. More land was added via use to the Dominion of Canada between 1898 and 1905. In 1898, through the Yukon Territory Act. In 1905, through the Alberta Act. And in 1905, through the Saskatchewan Act.
So I'm just going to stop that there again. So here's where Alberta comes into play, people. So Alberta, Saskatchewan, in 1905, under the Land Use Act, right, was basically confiscated and taken over by the Dominion of Canada, right? So Canada, at this juncture in time, is, I hate to break the news to you, is not a country, okay? And you're going to see this a little bit farther down the road. It's still not a country. It's a dominion of the crown. Dominion of colonies, okay? Let's go back to the show here.
Who owned the land of the Dominion of Canada? Did the land of the Dominion of Canada belong to the monarch? No. The Crown and Chancery held the title to all British lands, including the Dominion of Canada.
The Crown and Chancery. Never hear of Crown land? To this day. 2025. It's this. I'm going to tie this all together, folks.
The Crown and Chancery is the Department of Lands of Britain. It was established by the Privy Council.
Also, member of the Privy Council, Sir John A. Macdonald, remember, who was appointed Prime Minister of Canada. Appointed Prime Minister of Canada.
The Crown is a corporation soul. It represents the state in all its aspects. It can be used to refer to the office of the monarch or the monarchy as institutions. It can be used to refer to the rule of law or the functions of executive, legislative, and judicial governance. This is why all government and public land was called Crown land until it was granted by means of a Crown grant, also referred to as a land patent. The monarch was just a figurehead. The king or queen was not a sovereign any longer because they did not own the land. The governor general had more authority. He was also a corporation sole, given the sole government of the colony, with the assistance of members of the Privy Council and appointed by the Crown and Chancery.
So, there we go. So let's just recap that again. That's why government and public land was called Crown land until it was granted by means of a Crown grant, the land patent, okay? At which point in time, when the Crown and Chancery grants that, then Dominion of Canada has power over it. I dug into another rabbit hole by mistake here this morning that shows me a period of 50 years of land patents, and that's going to blow you away, but that's a different show for a different day, folks, right? So the monarch was just a figurehead. Monarch, or a king, being a sovereign. A sovereign owns the land, okay? Just remember that. Very, very another key definition going down the road here.
What is the difference between a monarch and a sovereign? Authority of government originates in the title to land. A king or queen is a sovereign when he or she has absolute authority over the land, and thus absolute power. A king or queen becomes a monarch when he or she does not have absolute authority over the land. The king or queen alone has no power. The title to all British lands was held by the Crown and Chancery and not by the king or queen. All government and public land was called Crown land.
Okay, so going forward, Very important to remember who is a sovereign. And when one is given sovereignty, who becomes that sovereign? That's a very critical thing to pay attention to in this legislation. And this is dry as hell. I hated history when I went to school. Maybe I've been a smarter man, I would have paid attention. But the fact is, I'm a mechanic, and I learn by doing. And guess what? We're doing.
The Governor General had sole authority to govern Canada as a corporation sole with the advice of the Privy Council. He was appointed by the commission created in 1878 and not by the King or the Queen or the House of Commons or the House of Lords.
So once again, here we go. Governor General had sole authority, or still to this day has sole authority, to govern Canada as a corporation sole, with the advice of the Privy Council, and he was appointed in the commission, created in 1878. Look at the date here, 1878, by the King or the Queen, House of Commons, and for the Lord. So that's who give the Governor General and Lieutenant Governor General authority. That's why to this day, when we have asked to have an election, we do exactly that. We ask the Prime Minister, the Premier goes to the House of the Crown, talks to the Governor General, and says, we'd like you to dissolve Parliament. We would like you to drop a writ and call an election. Canadians aren't doing that, people. Canadians are not doing that. Absolutely not doing that. We ask the Crown to do that under their authority in 2025.
In September of 1926, Russell Rogers Smith of the Native Sons of Canada, a movement aimed at fostering national spirit, creating Canadian nationality, adopting a Canadian flag, and having more autonomy, presented a resolution to the Prime Minister, Mackenzie King. One main request of that resolution was the necessity of elevating Canada constitutionally to the status of a sovereign nation and to confer on Canada an equality of status with Great Britain. It requested an equal and independent sovereignty under the Crown of Canada.
Okay. September of 1926, not July 1st, 1867. September 1926, Russell Rogers Smith, right? He put together a resolution and he explained the necessity of elevating Canada constitutionally to the status of a sovereign nation. Remember? Because we were the Dominion of Canada. The Dominion is an assembly of colonies owned by the Crown. Just want to get this straight, people, so we all know where we're at.
Another request was that Great Britain should not be allowed to make Canada pay for any claims that may arise out of Great Britain's defense actions. Another important request was that all natural resources of Canada belong to the people of Canada and not Great Britain. The resolution further requested that the roles and authority of the Governor General be fundamentally changed for the benefit of Canada. As we will see, it was the work of Russell Rogers Smith that would have paved the path to real freedom. In October of 1926, at the Imperial Conference in London, led by Lord Arthur J. Balfour, Mackenzie King, and representatives of the other dominions of Great Britain met to discuss and determine the status between Great Britain and the dominions of Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the Irish Free State.
What? There were other dominions? It was not just the Dominion of Canada? Is that for real? So we have the dominions of South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the Irish Free State. Oh, there were other dominions involved too, as well as the Dominion of Canada.
The report concluded that the dominions are autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status. in no way subordinate one to another in any aspect of their domestic or external affairs. They were united by a common allegiance to the Crown and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations. This was scheduled to be made law with the enactment of the Statute of Westminster on December 11, 1931.
Damn, this is the most important legislation you are ever going to learn of.
Prior to the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, the Government of Canada was composed of a Governor-General and a select committee of the Imperial Privy Council, one of which headed the Supreme Court of Canada. Any member of the Imperial Privy Council was a member of the Government of Canada. The House of Commons, the Senate of Canada, the Privy Council for Canada, which was appointed by the Governor-General, and the Lieutenant Governors of the provinces were to aid and advise the Governor-General and the government. The Governor-General was the sole government. Neither the Legislative Assembly nor the House of Commons were responsible to the Canadian people. They were responsible to the Governor-General only.
Now, how much truth is it to that? I know a little sidebar, a little side note here. Being a podcast type of guy, I invite all kinds of people on the show. And I try to do a little bit of research about them before I get them on the show. Layla Goodrich is a member of Parliament for former Murray Cold Lake region, who's the incumbent member of Parliament and running for re-election with no contestants in present view. I asked her to be on the podcast, and she threw a bunch of word salad at me. Ironically, what I did do is I did some history on her and checked her voting patterns in the House of Commons for the last 4 years. And she was voting right wing, maybe a little in the middle, right wing. But every month, she voted yay to sending funds to the British government every month, like rent payment. I will dig down that rabbit hole, okay? But what we need to understand, so the House of Commons, Senate of Canada, the Privy Council for Canada, which is appointed by the Governor-General, the Privy Council, very important. Lieutenant Governors of province were to aid and advise the Governor-General in the government. The Governor-General was the sole government. Neither the Legislative Assembly nor the House of Commons are responsible to the Canadian people. They're responsible, truly, to the Governor-General only. So let's get back to the show on this one. This legislation, Statute of Westminster, is pivotal in this country.
Each Lieutenant Governor, appointed by the Governor-General, was also a corporation sole, acting as the representative of the Governor-General, and not as a representative of elected representatives or the people. As we will see, the Statute of Westminster is the most important document in the history of the landmass known as Canada. We will only look at the 3 key sections of the Statute of Westminster that apply to the Dominion of Canada. These are: Section 2 removed colonial law from the Dominion of Canada. Recall, the Dominion of Canada was defined as a colony of Great Britain.
Okay, so key sections here, guys. Statute of Westminster, removal of colonial law from the Dominion of Canada, and the Dominion of Canada was defined as a colony of Great Britain, right? So that's Colonial Laws Validity Act in 1865. Will not apply to any law made after the commencement of this act by the Parliament of Dominion. Don't forget, there are other dominions: Dominion Australia, Dominion New Zealand, and Free Irish, right? 3 other dominions, as well as the Dominion of Canada.
No law made by the Parliament of a Dominion is void just because it may not be in accordance with British law. This section does not apply to Australia because Australia had a so-called constitution in 1901 and was not a dominion in 1931.
Aha! So, Australian. Congratulations, Australian. So, Guy, remember we were talking at the table the other morning before shift, right? Australia in 1901 created its own constitution, right? Because it had become a sovereign state. Watch this.
Let's look at Section 11 before looking at Section 7. Section 11 of the Statute of Westminster severed the connection between the Dominion and a colony of Great Britain. What does this mean? The key word is notwithstanding. It means Section 11 overrides the Interpretation Act of 1889, which defined the term colony. The provinces were not joined as one colony of Great Britain any longer, and each province was also not a colony of Great Britain any longer. Who owned the land now? The people of each province naturally took ownership of the land. This also removed the Governor General because the Crown and Chancery lost the allodial title to the land.
Okay, so Section 11 of Statute of Westminster, right? That is the actual mechanism that takes Canada and breaks it into provinces with sovereignty, right? So it severed the connection between the Dominion and a colony of Great Britain, right? So notwithstanding anything in the Interpretation Act of 1889. So this act here circumvents that. The expression of a colony shall not, in any act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act, include a Dominion or any province or state forming part of a Dominion. So that the Crown says we wash our hands of it. Okay, you kids are out of the house, basically.
There is no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state. No confederation happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. Section 11 finally raised each province of Canada from the position of a colony to that of a sovereign state.
That, my friends, is so important, right? So what that did, that legislation, Section 11 in the Statute of Westminster, so there's no intermediate status. You don't leave the Dominion of Canada, which is a group of British colonies, and become a country. You have to have a process from moving as a colony to a country. Does that make sense? So no confederation happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. Prior to the Statute of Westminster in 1931, provinces never had sovereignty, okay? No confederation happened because provinces never were given that sovereignty. And so what this did, Section 11, it gave them that sovereignty of their own province to the people, sovereignty to the people.
Section 7 is misleading in how it deals with the applicability of this statute to Canada. Subsection 1 attempts to exclude the BNA Act from this statute. However, the BNA Act was only a statute, a guide of the Imperial Parliament to aid the Governor General. It could only be effective if there is a duly appointed Governor General. See Section 12 of the BNA Act, 1867. Since the Crown and Chancery, who appoints the Governor General, gave up allodial title to the land, thanks to Section 11, there can be no more Governor General. The result is, this subsection is redundant. Subsection 2 clarifies that Section 2 of the statute removing colonial law also applies to any of the provinces. This makes each province a sovereign state, nation, or country, because confederation never happened. Only sovereign states can join into a confederation, and the provinces were not sovereign until the Statute of Westminster was passed.
Okay, wow. What does that mean? What that means is that people who want to get out of confederation, blah, 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 secession, Quebec, all that stuff, guess what? Each province has its own sovereignty. And this is going to tie it a little bit farther here too, because we're going to go into the Meech Lake Accord, and it just gets better and better and better, folks. So people feel alienated in Alberta and think of separation. You need to share this. You need to share this, and you need to share this. It took me, I've watched this video 8 times to grab the complexity of it and the magnitude of what this implies. Back to the show, folks. Once again, subsection 2 clarifies that subsection 2 clarifies that section 2 of the statute removing of colonial law, right, over the colonies, also applies to each and every province. This makes each province a sovereign state from this juncture in time forward. Okay, 1931, right? Because Confederation never happened, and Confederation did not happen in 1867. A dominion of colonies was formed. So be very clear and concise in that. The Confederation did not happen. Okay, only sovereign states can join into a confederation, right? And the province weren't sovereign until the Statute of Westminster was passed in 1931. So in 1867, the provinces didn't even have the power, authority, and ability, okay, to form a confederation. Back to the show.
Subsection 3 clarifies that the provinces can only act within their boundaries and cannot impose laws on any other province. But what is the Parliament of Canada now? Is Canada defined? In summary, Section 2 removed colonial law from the Dominion of Canada as it was a colony of Great Britain. Section 7 removed colonial law from each province. Section 11 removed the status of colony, which immediately ended the Dominion of Canada. It also immediately removed the Governor General. There is no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state. Sovereignty and the ownership of land go hand in hand. No confederation happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. Each province of Canada was now for the first time a sovereign state.
Okay, old guys back here again, folks. So, the summary. Section 2 removes colonial law from the Dominion of Canada, which made us a colony of Great Britain, right? New Zealand was colony. Australia was colony. Irish Free State, colonies. All 4 of us, 4 colonies, okay? Section 11 removed the status of colony, removed that status of colony, and which ended the Dominion of Canada, and it also immediately should have removed the Governor General position, which was designated by the Chancery, Crown and Chancery. Remember? That's the Lands and Titles Office. They set up, as part of the Privy Council, the Governor General, right? There's no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state, okay? It's immediate. There's no transitional phase, right? It's not like we're going to say we're going to take 3 years to move from a colony to a sovereign state. Sovereignty and the ownership of the land goes hand in hand. And no confederation happened, once again, like I said before, because the provinces were never sovereign states to start with. So each province in Canada, as of 1931, Statute of Westminster, now have true sovereignty.
This status has not changed since December 11, 1931. No province has held a constitutional convention. No province has seated a de jure lawful government. Extremely important. Every politician, every governor general, every prime minister, every law, every act, everything has been illegitimate since December 11th, 1931. Anything that was passed after this date is not applicable to the people of each province.
Wow. So there is that in a nutshell, right? So as of December the 11th, 1931, no province has held a constitutional convention. No province has. No province is ceded a de jure. Or de jure is what is referred to as a lawful government. Okay. Every politician, governor general, prime minister, law, acts, everything's been illegitimate since that date. Anything that was passed after this date is not applicable to the people of each province, as written by the law, right?
Has freedom been hiding in plain sight for over 90 years? What happened after the Statute of Westminster was passed? Did the people in each province hold constitutional conventions and seat a de jure government? Sadly, no. Russell Rogers Smith said in the 1940s. What does the future hold? Is Canada to become an armed camp, each at the other's throat? Or can we unite to create a federal union, mutually adopting a constitution? It is very likely that many people did not comprehend at the time what the Statute of Westminster had actually achieved. The Great Depression also impacted many people who were desperately looking for help. In addition, it is likely that many of the politicians at the time did also not comprehend what the passing of the Statute of Westminster really meant.
Also going on in the world during the time of 1931, let's pull up my buddy ChatGPT here. 1931, we had the Great Depression, and we had World War II. Well, World War One. World War One, right? Was in 1914 to 1918. 1931 was Statute of Westminster, and in 1931, there was a ramp up to World War II, is what was going on, as well as the Great Depression.
It seems that those who did know simply continued as if nothing had happened. After all, there was a lot to lose. Recall, Section 109 of the BNA Act. In 1936, the Parliament of Canada attempted to revise the Statute of Westminster. They wanted to revise Section 7 of the statute to give the Parliament of Canada the power to enact a federal constitution and to continue the BNA Act until such constitution was in place. Did the Parliament have this power? Was the Parliament legitimate? Parliament also tried to amend the BNA Act. However, the BNA Act cannot be implemented without a Governor General. The Governor General used to be appointed by the Crown and Chancery, but the Crown and Chancery lost the title to the land. From the official website of the Governor General of Canada. Until 1931, Canada's Governor General was chosen by the Sovereign. This changed when the Canadian government began to make recommendations for the position. Who was the Sovereign? How were Governors General appointed? What changed in 1931? Who gave the Canadian government the authority to appoint the Governor General? Did they simply assume this authority? Could they issue letters patent? In 1945, Walter Cool, a member of Parliament from Alberta, addressed the House of Commons and presented a detailed speech about the constitutional problems. He clearly outlined the current status and the actions that should be taken. However, no action was taken. In 1947, Prime Minister Mackenzie King issued letters patent, appointing a Governor General. These letters patent were signed only by Mackenzie King. To this day, only the Lord High Commissioner of Great Britain, the Crown and Chancery, can issue letters patent. Nobody else has the power or authority to issue letters patent. The last ones that were issued are dated March 23rd, 1931.
Now, Isn't that so interesting, right? 1947, Mackenzie King, he issued a letter of patent appointing Governor General. That's where our Governor General today comes from. But Mackenzie King didn't have the authority, right, to create a Governor General and Lieutenant Governor, right? Only Lord High Commissioner. Great. So what's going on, folks? Just pay attention here. It only gets better.
In 1948, the Income Tax Act was implemented by an illegitimate Parliament of Canada and signed by an illegitimate Governor General, Harold Alexander of Tunis.
Well, the taxes start, people.
In 1952, the Royal Style and Titles Act was enacted by an illegitimate Parliament of Canada, in which the Parliament of Canada assented that Elizabeth II can proclaim herself to be the Queen in right of Canada.
The moment the Queen puts her signature on this
Justin
document,
Trudeau's dad, for those that have never seen him.
the Constitution is now home. A fanfare in the background, as you can hear.
In 1976, Walter Cool, a member of Parliament from Alberta, wrote a letter to René Lévesque, Premier-elect of Quebec, explaining that Quebec does not need to seek a formal separation because the province has been completely independent and sovereign since December 11th, 1931, just like every other province. How can you be divorced when you have never been married? In 1982, Pierre Elliott Trudeau initiated the grand deception that is called the Constitution Act of Canada, also known as the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. An illusion, as we will see, which many people strongly believe to be factual truth. Trudeau is said to have patriated, which means to transfer legislation to an autonomous country from its previous mother country, the defunct and meaningless BNA Act 1867 to Canada. Why did he only bring a photocopy? Why does the original BNA Act 1867 still reside in the parliamentary archives of Great Britain? Trudeau urged all provinces to ratify, which means to give formal consent to make something official, the document, so that Canadians could enjoy their new constitution as soon as possible. Did all the provinces sign? Was it ever ratified?
So, isn't that exciting now, people? So we take a look at that now. Let's just have a quick little boo. So what does this all mean? So if we jump into 1982, they say we finally got our Constitution, right? But here's what they don't say in history books. There was no referendum. There was no public consultation. Pierre Trudeau, the premiers, got together and they signed off on it. And boom, they got a deal done. Apparently. And you're going to see how that deal didn't really get done. And that's like changing your, think of it at work. If you're changing your company pension plan and you're calling it a team decision, but you weren't even in the fucking room, right? They call it patriation, but the people, we didn't even get invited to the birthday party. All 10 provinces still had their own sovereignty. None of the 10 provinces had entered into any type of confederation. Because remember, 1931, December 11th, Statute of Westminster is when they finally attained their sovereignty. So in 1867, the Dominion of Canada was formed. And I remember when we started down this road in 1982, and my dad was an Acadian. He's a French guy from fucking half Quebec, half that. And my mother was Irish. Her father come right from Ireland. And my dad thought this was such bullshit because fucking, what's this Canadian Constitution? We're not even a fucking country yet. My father was a layman, a welder, mechanic, master of all trades. He knew back in 1982 that Canada was still a Dominion. In 1981, July 1st, it was still Dominion Day. It was still Dominion Day. Once Justin's old man, right? No, well, Fidel Castro wasn't involved with that. When Pierre Elliott Trudeau did this deal of 1982, that's when the real illusion began. Because, in fact, Canada at that juncture in time was not a country, and a constitution or freedoms, charter of freedoms. Yeah, it just gets nastier and nastier. We'll go back to the show. You'll see. Telling too much.
Section 58 of the Canada Act, 1982, states that this act would only come into force by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General, and only if the conditions of Section 59 were met. Section 59 is equally important to comprehend. Subsection 1, paragraph 23, 1. A shall come into force in respect of Quebec on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General under the Great Seal of Canada.
Okay. In order for the Canada Act to be enabled, okay, paragraph 1, right, in section 59, shall come into force in respect of Quebec on the day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General of Canada. Right? Watch this. This is just good.
Subsection 2. A proclamation under subsection 1 shall be issued only where authorized by the Legislative Assembly or Government of Quebec.
We need Quebec to sign on to this to make the Canada legal.
Subsection 3. This section may be repealed on the day paragraph 23, 1. A comes into force in respect of Quebec, and this act amended and renumbered consequentially upon the repeal of this section by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General under the Great Seal of Canada. The key phrase here is in respect of Quebec. Section 23.
A little backup in history here, right? Quebec, Upper Canada, Lower Canada, right? Quebec was Upper Canada. It was the predominant force in the initial 4 phases in the Dominion of Canada, okay? This is why even during 1982, Quebec gets so much power here.
Minority language educational rights.
Section 23 of the Charter.
Citizens of Canada, whose first language learned and still understood is that of the English or French linguistic minority population, have the right to have their children receive primary and secondary school instruction in that language in that province. Recall Section 59, subsection 3, in respect of Quebec. This section may be repealed on the day paragraph 23, 1. A comes into force in respect of Quebec, and this act amended and renumbered consequentially upon the repeal of this section by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General under the Great Seal of Canada. This means that only Quebec would lose their educational right in the French language.
Aha! So Quebec would truly have to be part of the family. That's it, right? Quebec would lose their educational right in the French language. Okay? That's why Quebec does not sign on.
What were the steps to ratify and enact the Canada Act, 1982? 1. All provinces would need to sign Schedule B of the Act, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. 2. Quebec would need to authorize a proclamation to enact Section 23, 1A of the Act. 3. Section 23, 1A would be enacted through a proclamation. 4. Section 59, 3 would be enacted through a proclamation to repeal Section 59 and renumber the Act. 5. Section 58 would be enacted through a proclamation to pass the Act. A total of 3 proclamations were needed to pass the Act. Which of these steps have been completed? None.
Are you getting that? So, the Canadian Constitution, Charters of Rights, Freedoms. So, we need 3 proclamations to pass the act. 3. Guess what? 0, none, nada, nothing. Never got passed, right? These steps have not been completed to ratify and enact the Canada Act. To put that modern day terms, that's the same as when Justin Trudeau was going to said he was going to take 66% on capital gains tax, and CRA acted on it without going to vote in the House of Commons. Guess what? Very same thing with CRA enabling a law that was suggested. That's exactly what we're seeing. This is the illusion that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Canada Act 1982, blah, 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 right, was never fucking ratified. It was never enacted. It's invalid. So now that takes us back to the Statute of Westminster, December 11th, 1931, where Alberta and every other province gained sovereignty. Sovereignty being ownership of the land by the people, no longer by the Crown. Why the fuck are we still answering to the Crown? Why do we change Court of Queen's Bench to Court of King's Bench? Why do we have a Governor General? Why do we have a Lieutenant Governor? Let's move on down the road here, folks.
But what about the proclamation from 1982? From the Royal Proclamation, 1982. Now know you that we, vying with the advice our Privy Council for Canada, do by this our proclamation declare that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force.
Subject.
Recall, subject to Section 59 means 2 proclamations must be made before the final proclamation to pass the Act, Section 58, could be made. This Royal Proclamation, 1982, is only a proclamation stating that there will be a proclamation in the future. Nothing was passed. Nothing was enacted. There is no Constitution. There is no Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Royal Proclamation 1983 had nothing to do with the passing of the Canada Act 1982. This act simply converted the status of Aboriginal people from sovereigns to persons. Even the 1987 Meech Lake Accord and the 1992 Charlottetown Accord failed to enact the Canada Act 1982, also known as the Constitution Act 1982.
That's pretty critical there, people. 1987, Meech Lake Accord, right? Brian Mulroney championed that. 92, Charlottetown Accord. What those 2 accords was an attempt to make Canada truly a country. And you remember we needed 3 articles, right, to be move this thing forward, right? So we're into 1987 now. The Charlottetown Accord fails to enact Canada Act.
Reminder, everything since December 11th, 1931 has been illegitimate, null and void. Since the fraud has obviously continued, why would Quebec not speak up and call it out?
Check this out.
Maybe the over $12 billion in equalization payments that Quebec has received on average each year has played a role.
And have to relinquish.
Let's take a look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 1. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out and it's subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. This gives the government the option to ignore the Charter, and it is why the courts often side with the government. Section 7.
And that's the same item that Justin Trudeau used to suppress people in 2022 who are honking horns. Same article, number 1.
Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. What is a person? Section 32. This charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada, and to the legislature and government of each province. Does the charter apply to the living men and women or only to persons? A charter is a reservation of a ship or a written grant by which a corporation is founded and its rights and privileges are defined. A ship needs to be chartered to land it and reflag it. A person is a legal fiction. A corporation is also a legal fiction, but not a person. The charter was meant to create a ship at sea, which was intended to bring maritime law onto the land. Through persons, the living men and women would be brought under maritime law jurisdiction. This is why all provinces needed to sign the charter. A charter differs from a constitution in this that the former is granted by a foreign government, while the latter is established by the people themselves.
Did we get that? That's very important there. A charter differs from constitution. That the former is granted by a foreign government, right? The charter is granted by a foreign government, and the latter, being a constitution, is established by the people themselves, right? Charter of rights and freedoms, not a constitution. Canada has no constitution. Provincially, no one has a constitution. Australia has a constitution. New Zealand has a constitution. Ireland has a constitution.
There is no lawfully established independent country called Canada. There is a geographical area that is comprised of sovereign nations, also known as provinces. How exactly is Canada defined in the Interpretations Act, 1985? Canada includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial sea of Canada. Canadian waters includes the territorial sea of Canada and the internal waters of Canada. Internal waters means the internal waters of Canada and includes the airspace above and the bed and subsoil below those waters. Territorial sea means the territorial sea of Canada and includes the airspace above and the seabed and subsoil below that sea. The land is not included anywhere. Why? Because they lost access to the land when the Dominion ended with the Statute of Westminster, when the land was naturally returned to the people.
December 11th, 1931, right? So now let's move forward to 1985, the Interpretations Act, defining Canada. The actual definition of what is Canada. Land is excluded from that definition. And why is that? Because December 11th, 1931, we're going to the Statute of Westminster, and that land was no longer owned by the Crown and Chancery. It was returned to the people. Sovereignty.
Through the person, the all caps name on all forms, IDs, licenses, passports, birth certificates, etc., you have submitted yourself to operate within maritime law.
Maritime
You
law.
have only those privileges that the corporation grants to you. Those do not include unalienable rights. What is the solution? How do we get out of this? Do we want to get out of this? Educate yourself. Learn these facts. Break the patterns and the indoctrination, like celebrating Canada Day and waving the Canadian flag. Educate your children because they are the ones building the future. Using the Socratic method to break through the brainwashing, asking simple questions instead of presenting facts, educate your family, friends, and neighbors. Offer help, kindness, and patience to those that have awoken from the deep sleep and are desperately looking for answers and support. When the people in each sovereign province are ready, a constitutional convention will be held to elect delegates and agree on a provincial constitution, accepted by a majority of the people, after which a de jure, lawful government is seated. This will all need to be done without corporate interference of any kind, for example, bar-carded attorneys. Only after each province has been properly established with a constitution and a de jure government, all provinces can then, if they desire to do so, hold a convention to discuss a federation of the provinces. We have been living under communist tyranny as slaves within a corrupt, corporate, yet illegitimate system based on maritime law for decades. Some people like it, but most don't. Waving and displaying the Canadian flag is not a symbol of freedom and free spirit, because it is the symbol and trademark of an evil corporation. When you wave this flag, you are submitting yourself to the color of laws of the corporation. For many years, people did not want to hear the truth. The truth and its speakers were ridiculed and silenced. Lately, though, more and more people are suffering at the hand of communism, and they do not like it. They see that something is deeply wrong. Since the people on the landmass known as Canada have been indoctrinated for decades and conditioned to be obedient slaves of the system, many may have to suffer immensely to be broken enough to accept the truth and to have the will to change. If recent worldwide events are any indication, then nothing can stop what is coming.
You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
All right, so there we go. I hope truly that enlightens you. It's exactly where we are in Canada. You don't have to believe it, but what you do need to do now is start asking yourself some questions, some serious questions. I'm going to put a link to this website to lead you down this path. That legislation is available online. You can read each respective act in its entirety if you need that confirmation. But folks, guess what? Alberta doesn't need a referendum to separate. We have the reformed constitution to become a province or a state or whatever we want to be. And that, thanks to Quebec, the federal government attempted to resolve that issue to fix the statute in 1931. Remember, Statute of Westminster, December 11th, 1931. That's when we gave sovereignty. We could not have been a confederation July 1st, 1967. We became a dominion. Dominion is a group of colonies owned by Great Britain. 1967, 100-year anniversary of the Dominion of Canada. 1982, Justin's old man realized something was wrong, and he had to enact the statute of 1931. The government had moved along through two world wars, through a Great Depression, and in that transitional phase from 31 to 45, there's a lot of turmoil in the world, and people were worrying about putting something on the table, not about legislation. And it got side shifted pretty quick by the powers of the day. This, to this day, finally answered one question for me. Why do we have a governor general? And why do we have a lieutenant governor? Simple as that. So if you think this hour presentation is a bunch of bullshit, all the power to you. I'm going to ask you to do more research and ask more questions. If you don't believe the validity of it, go to each section of the act that's in that video. And man, I'm telling you, I had to look at it 8, 9, 10 times to get my hand around it. And I'm still kind of in disbelief. How do we fix it? I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. Jump into the podcast. Tell me what you think your solutions to Canada the illusion is. Well, right now, man, I'm pretty disgusted with the entire thing. We've been hoodwinked since 1931. I understand what my dad was saying. I thought he was just a crazy French guy. Talking back in 1982, I was 22. I was all about being the righteous guy, the nice guy, the accepting guy, the tolerant guy, blah, 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 blah. And my dad, he was a hard Quebecer. Well, actually Acadian, but he sided with the French. And he had greatly despised the English. Ironically, he married an Irish girl from St. John, New Brunswick. So in New Brunswick, it's a cataclysm of Canada, I guess. It's to the northern part of the province is French, the southern part it's English. We have loyalists and the French. And my dad was adamant we were not part of Canada. There was no Canada. We were part of a Dominion, and Quebec would never sign on to it, and it was the right thing. I understand what he was talking about now, Dad. I apologize. We're in 2025. I finally figured out what you knew so many years ago, pal. But he is passed now, and so is my mom. That's history in a nutshell. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I run 17, 20 minutes later over on this podcast. I'm going to get it into editing right quick and drop it so it's fresh within an hour here or so. Thank you for all my followers. I got to stop and say thanks to everybody. TikTok, we're at 2,580 people. Instagram at 3,229. YouTube, 1,439. And I'm going to be migrating a whole bunch of stuff over to Rumble as well as YouTube, okay? And you can follow me on my usual Facebook feeds too. Facebook, what I'm doing is I'm just dropping little, what we call clips or quick clips or media clips just to entice you to come to the bigger program, right? You can find me on Apple. You can find me on Spotify. So if you're just listening to the podcast, thank you very much. If you're watching the show, YouTube, by all means do so. The guys in the lunchroom and Statute of Westminster, December 11th, 1931. Now you know the importance of that day that we talked about. Guy Mooring at work. Congratulations to Australia drawing up a constitution, 1905, man. Brilliant. These guys were brilliant. Fucking a lot smarter than Canadians. I'll give you that. Once again, this Maynard from Years of Trust. Tune it off. I'll get this thing into editing and get it out there so everybody can see. Thank you so much for the following. It's greatly appreciated. I'm very humbled by the following. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.